Did you know that right on the day of its release, the new Demon Slayer Infinity Castle movie pulled in 1.6 billion yen in just 24 hours? By its first weekend, it smashed records with 5.5 billion yen. And if we go back to when the official trailer dropped on June 28, 2025, the trailer racked up over 40 million views in just 24 hours. And by the way, the Demon Slayer Infinity Castle movie has now officially surpassed Mugen Train as the highest-grossing anime film of all time. Speaking of Mugen Train, Kyojoro's last words to Tanjiro were, "Go ahead and live with your head held high. No matter how devastated you may be by your own weakness or usefulness, set your heart ablaze, grit your teeth, and look straight ahead." Then in Chapter 203, as Tanjiro is succumbing to demonhood, a bunch of dead characters we know are supporting his back and helping him return to being human. And guess who's the one holding Tanjiro's head high? It's Kyojoro himself. When it comes to Kyojoro, you must have noticed that members of his family have unique flame-like hair. It's because of a family tradition called kankagari. Basically, every 7 days during pregnancy, the wives would stare at a flaming torch for 2 hours. That's why their sons are born with flame-colored hair. In Kyojoro's own spin-off, he literally jokes that it's because his ancestors ate too much tempura. Inosuke loves tempura so much, he actually uses it to lock in, like we saw during his training at the Butterfly Mansion. It's revealed in the first fan book that even though Kyojoro wanted one, he was never allowed to have a pet because his father hated animals. When Kyojoro was on his very first mission, he ruptured his own eardrums just to counter a flute demon's blood demon art. As for his trademark umai, or delicious, it came from the samurai tradition of savoring every bite as if it could be your last. When we see him on the Mugen Train and he's spamming the term umai, he's actually savoring the last meal of his life. In Rengoku Volume 0, it's revealed that Kyojoro lived his life by 2 mottos. If you put in your all, you'll stand your ground even in death. And nothing's impossible if you put your mind to it. It's no wonder that in the Kimetsu Academy parody series, he's a passionate history teacher who takes things so far that he leads cavalry charges in class. Inosuke loves butchering everyone's names. But did you know that he gets it right every 7th try? Weird. By the Infinity Castle arc, he starts calling the people closest to him by their real names. These include Tanjiro, Zenitsu, Shinobu, and Kanao. Fans first saw Inosuke's real face not in the manga, but in a gag comic from Jump Giga. Gotoge-sensei even had to apologize for the accidental spoiler in the author's comments on the 4th volume's release. Inosuke makes a surprise cameo in Chapter 191 of Witch Watch. He shows up as one of Momotaro's companions. He's also the only Demon Slayer who deliberately chips his swords with rocks to give them jagged edges. It's his way of customizing the blades for his unique beast breathing. He personally created it based on the movements of boars, bears, and wolves. In the second fanbook, it was revealed that Inosuke respects Nezuko like a mother figure. Nezuko never mocked him or yelled at him for being odd, and always treated him with kindness. And so, whenever Nezuko visited Kanao or Aoi once a month, Inosuke would spend time with her and report things to her like a child ranting to his mom. Aoi doesn't smile much. It feels like she always has a little scowl on her face, but Inosuke being silly somehow always ends up making her laugh. Ever wondered how Inosuke learned to talk? It's because in an extra chapter, we see that an old man took him in and taught him how to talk. You must have noticed that Inosuke's Kasugai crow hides most of the time, and that's for good reason. It's because Inosuke almost ate it on 18 different occasions. And remember when he promised to punch Murata whenever they met again? As we see in the extra pages of Volume 20, when they meet again in the Infinity Castle, Inosuke was already too injured to follow through. So instead, he kicks Murata in the face. In preparation for the battle against Muzan and the Upper Moon, Shinobu fills her body with wisteria poison. Although the manga originally said it was 70 times the lethal dose, the volume release changed it to 700. There's also another layer of meaning to Kanao being able to show emotions. Her name, Kanao, translates to honest flower. Many fans believe it connects not only to her Kocho Kanai's name, but also to the Japanese word igao, which means smile. Her name itself seems like a quiet wish that one day she would bloom honestly, show her feelings, and smile for real. And by the end of the story, we see Kanao not just smile constantly, but also live with the warmth and openness her sisters always wanted for her. Kanao's birthday, May 19th, isn't the day she was born. It's the day Kanai and Shinobu adopted her. Next, Shinobu's death shocks Giyu the most out of all the Hashira. Every other Hashira knew about her plan, but not him. When her death was announced, he froze in disbelief as he remembered her smile. Speaking of Giyu, his Demon Slayer mark appears exactly where his best friend Sabito once slapped him to make him stop being such a doomer. And one thing you must have noticed about the entire battle with Akaza is this thing called the Realm of the Highest. The irony here is legendary. Back during his battle with Kyojuro, Akaza literally told him that the reason he couldn't enter the realm was because he was human. But the great irony is that no demon in history has ever come anywhere close to this state. Akaza may have come the closest by being able to recognize that Tanjiro had achieved it, but no demon from any time period has ever actually attained that state. In fact, not a single Hashira has come close either. The only 3 known individuals in the entire history of Demon Slayer to reach the pinnacle of physical combat are Yoriichi, Tanjiro, and our boy Tanjiro. Still, while there's irony in Akaza's words to Kyojuro about becoming a demon, Akaza was able to consciously override Muzan's influence over him to end his own life. A legendary move because, for what it's worth, Akaza was incredibly loyal to Muzan. In fact, Akaza and Gyutaro were even rumored to be Muzan's favorite upper moons. There was one time when Akaza actually complained to Muzan. It's revealed in the second fanbook that when Doma became Upper Moon 2, Akaza complained to Muzan for the first and only time in their entire history. It's also easy to understand why. Even though Akaza had lost his memories, he would still never hurt or eat women, while Doma most likely only ever ate women. But it's not just Akaza or us viewers who hate Doma. It's been well established that other demons don't like him either. To add to this, out of all the upper moons, Doma is the one who Muzan liked the least. This is because Muzan knew that Doma would not show growth because he lacked the ability to feel emotions. This is also why Doma was rarely sent on missions, while Akaza was always out on missions. But as much as a psycho that Doma is he even the most hateable upper moon? No, that title has got to go to the guy who betrayed Guillaume, then betrayed the former Thunder Hashira Jigoro, his junior Zenitsu, and the entire Demon Slayer Corps to become the only modern-day Demon Slayer to turn into a demon. We are, of course, talking about Kaigaku. Him and Gyutaro are the only upper moons who never got to chat with Muzan on screen. Zenitsu, whom Kaigaku spent half his life looking down on, pulled off 2 feats reserved for Hashira in the Infinity Castle. He created an entirely new breathing form of his own, and he defeated an upper moon all by himself. To put that in perspective, only a Hashira like Giyu has ever created a new form of a major breathing style, and only Muichiro has ever taken down an upper moon solo. But here's where it gets even better. Zenitsu's new forms also tie him to Nezuko's ideal man. Takeo once asked his sister Nezuko about her ideal man, and she replied that her ideal man was like Aisha in shogi. That's a rock, and that's Zenitsu to a T. His whole style is built on the first form Thunderclap and Flash, a lightning-fast strike that cuts down enemies before they can react. He essentially moves like a rook, considering how he charges in a straight line. So, just like Aisha in shogi, Zenitsu can move any number of unoccupied squares horizontally and vertically. So, as much of a coward as he is, he literally becomes Nezuko's ideal man in battle. Before Nezuko, Zenitsu had 7 girlfriends, and not a single one of them treated him kindly. They all used him, took his money, and left him with around 600,000 yen worth of debt. He also wrote a 79-volume-long memoir titled The Legend of Zenitsu. In it, he says he's 9 feet tall, calls Sanemi a thief, calls Tanjiro his apprentice, and describes Nezuko as everything from a princess to a plum tree spirit. Nezuko is the very first demon to ever become part of the Demon Slayer Corps. Later, Tamayo and Yushiro also join, but Nezuko reserves the honor of being the very first. Now, when it comes to her design, there's a sweet little detail. The reason her hair is no longer tied up after becoming a demon is because Tanjiro just isn't very good at doing it for her. The small accessory at the front is the one thing he can manage, so it stays on. Nezuko actually loves having her hair braided like Mitsuri's, and in Chapter 105, we even see Tanjiro trying his best to braid it for her. Moving on, Genya's death. As Sanemi is having a full emotional, mental, and psychological breakdown watching his little brother die, he speaks his heart out. But by that point, Genya's ears had already disintegrated. In the end, he couldn't hear the words Sanemi was saying. Sadly, Sanemi's pain goes even deeper. When Muzan was finally defeated and Sanemi was close to death, he saw his siblings waiting for him in the afterlife. But his mother wasn't there. She admitted she couldn't join them because she had killed her own children. Sanemi, being the guy he is, simply smiled and told her he'd go with her to hell. The only reason that didn't happen was because his abusive father pushed him away, which essentially snapped him out of the death he was about to experience. Sanemi actively hunted and killed demons before joining the Demon Slayer Corps, sorta like a vigilante. He was killing demons before he even knew anything about the Demon Slayers or Nichiren swords. He just used gardening tools and chains to restrain them and then drag them into the sunlight to burn them alive. Now, he's not the only one who's killed demons before joining. Guillaume once fought a demon all night until the sunrise finally finished it off. and Muichiro managed to immobilize a demon completely so it couldn't regenerate before the sun destroyed it. Another unique trait is Sanemi's blood. He's a rare Marechi, which means his blood can intoxicate demons and throw off their senses. It's so potent that it even threw Kokoshibo off his flow. Also, fun fact, Sanemi loved Shinobu's sister. The author should have included him at the scene where Shinobu faced off against Doma. Honestly, this was a huge missed out opportunity. There's even Mitsuri and Obanai, a love story that waited until the very end. After Muzan's defeat, with Mitsuri fatally wounded and Obanai blind, they finally confessed their feelings. Mitsuri asked if, in another life, he would marry her. Obanai promised he would, and he vowed not to let her die again. And in chapter 205, that promise came true. When they're reborn, they run a food shop together, and they go on to have 5 carefree children. Mitsuri was constantly rejected for being different, but for Obanai, who was treated like cattle by women for 12 years, she wasn't just the first woman he found beautiful, she was the only one. Despite his trauma, he fell for her the moment they met. It was love at first sight, so intense that Kaburomaru panicked and bit him. Obanai also barely ever ate. Sometimes he'd even go 3 days without eating. But whenever he saw Mitsuri enjoying her meals, he would force himself to eat more just to share the simple joy of just having a meal together with her. Next, we know that after Obanai's death, his snake Kaburomaru the goat was entrusted to Kanao by Sanemi. That wasn't a random choice though. Sanemi and Obanai actually got along the best among the Hashira. And Sanemi knew Kaburomaru had a little crush on Shinobu, which is why Sanemi found it right to have Shinobu's home, the Butterfly Mansion, be his new home. Moving on, we have Guillaume. He wasn't always blind. He lost his sight because of a fever he had as a child. That fever came from the same epidemic that killed his father, and his mother had already died giving birth to him. So even after he lost his vision, his eyes had already seen nothing but suffering. And blindness also never held him back. He developed a sixth sense that was strong enough to detect malice itself. When people tried to scam him or trip him, he always knew. But if he ever called them out on what they were trying to pull, they'd just call him a liar. That's why when he was blamed for the demon attack that caused the orphans' deaths, he didn't even bother defending himself. Years of doubt had already taught him that no one would listen anyway. Fortunately, Ubuyashiki stepped in. Guillaume rose to Hashira rank in just 2 months. While others trained for years, he poured every ounce of grief and emotion into his training. He brought out the maximum potential of his physical body. There's a reason even Kokoshibo admitted he hadn't seen anyone like him in 3 centuries. Guillaume is also the Hashira who saved Shinobu and Kanai from the demon attack that killed their parents. After Kanai's death, he could feel Shinobu's resolve to sacrifice herself for revenge, and though he wanted to stop her, he couldn't bring himself to say the words. Now back to Kokoshibo. He fought 3 challengers for his upper moon spot. He absorbed 2 challengers but spared Akaza because he enjoyed the fight. But did you know that he once killed a Demon Slayer Corps leader? That was the incident that led to the creation of the Kakashi attendants. Next, Kokoshibo's death showed just how torn he was. For over 400 years, he carried the flute Yorichi once gave him. He forgot his wife and child, but never let go of that flute. That contradiction defined his entire life. He was a man who hated Yorichi, yet also loved him to the point where he could never sever their connection. That's why when he died, only half of his 6 eyes shed tears. One side was filled with rage, regret, and jealousy, while the other side overflowed with sorrow, love, and the humanity he had buried for centuries. Speaking of the flute, there's more to it. After Yorichi died a natural death right in front of him, Kokoshibo kept the flute with him for 4 centuries. But that also means Yorichi carried it for over 7 decades of his life. And what's even more moving is that the bag holding it was made from the cloth of his wife Yuta's kimono. Let's move on to the Hanafuda earrings. These earrings became the symbol of sun breathing, but their origin is surprisingly simple. Yorichi's mother gave them to him because she believed he was deaf. While Yorichi himself may be remembered as quiet and reserved, there's another side to him. You see, once he grows close to you, he speaks quite a lot. That's why even though he was banished after his brother became a demon, some of the Hashira kept in touch with him. In the Volume 23 extras, it's hinted that Yorichi and his wife Yuta reincarnated in the modern era. This time, they go on to live a happy, simple life as a married couple with children. The blue spider lily, the flower Muzan searched for across 1,000 years, actually bloomed exactly at the grave of Yorichi's wife, Yuta. And here's another connection. It was the spot where Tanjiro's mother once showed him the blue spider lilies during his childhood. And we actually see the place where Tanjiro's memories flash in chapter 39. But why couldn't Muzan find this flower for 1,000 years? It's because the flower only blooms for a couple of days every few years, and only during the day. In fact, at night, it resembles something else. Still, I know what you're thinking. Why didn't Muzan consider the idea that the flower may bloom during the day? Well, he did. The second fan book mentions that he used humans to search for it too, but it's just so rare that for all we know, the only characters who have actually seen it are Tanjiro, Tanjiro's mother, and Muzan's doctor. After Muzan became a demon, he married 5 different women throughout the Heian period, but his lack of empathy and constant verbal abuse drove every single one of them to kill themselves. Even despite being a monster and obsessed with eradicating humanity, Muzan still had time for hobbies. He loved to culture himself by learning new foreign words, studying imported goods, and keeping up with the latest technologies. Plus, unlike most demons who could form clothes from their flesh, Muzan actually bought his outfits. It fit his taste for high fashion and his constant disguises. If you're wondering where his money came from, Muzan used to sell Gyoko's pots for a nice source of income. The Iboyashiki family history is tragic. Because their bloodline produced Muzan, the king of demons, they were cursed with a genetic disease. The rules of the curse were absolute. Every boy born into the Iboyashiki clan died before 30, and every girl had to marry and change her surname by 13, or she too would be claimed by accidents or illness. Add this curse with the responsibility of leading the Demon Slayer Corps, and you'll see how much it can affect the mental health of the family. Kaguya's father killed himself at only 19 because he was unable to endure the grief of watching Corps members die over and over. And when Kaguya took over as the family head, he was only 4 years old. But there is a happy ending. When Muzan is finally defeated, the curse is broken. The Iboyashiki family was freed from its grip and began living normal lives. In fact, Kaguya's son Kiryu, who led the Demon Slayers during the Infinity Castle, went on to live not only past 30, but long enough to become the oldest living person in Japan. He's still alive in the modern day. Yushiro outlives every other demon, including Muzan. Right now, as I speak, he and Chachimaru are the only 2 demons that are still around. But did you know his fate was foreshadowed from the beginning? The kanji for Yushiro breaks down like this. Yu means healing, shi means history or record, and ro is a common male suffix that means son or boy. That second kanji, shi, connected to history and records, was hinting at Yushiro's fate as the one left behind to carry the memory of everything that happened. He just spends his time painting Tamayo, and I bet he still keeps a diary where he writes about how wonderful she is. Tamayo is the first demon to ever break free from Muzan's control, and we know thanks to her appearance in the Yoriichi flashback that she's been rebelling against Muzan for over 4 centuries. Once Muzan's control was weakened after Yoriichi straight up washed him, Tamayo spilled the beans to Yoriichi and started surviving on eating animal and human corpses instead of killing anyone, until she finally transitioned to just human blood. This was because Yoriichi said he believed in her wish to defeat Muzan, and so she continuously fought against her demonic instincts and refused to ever attack humans again. Chachimaru is the first demon who's an animal. Kokoshibo and Tanjiro are the only 2 demons to have the Demon Slayer mark, and that's because they both activated their marks before they became demons. And, well, not every Hashira managed to awaken theirs. This was because Kanai Kocho and Kyojuro Rengoku died before Tanjiro's mark could serve as a precursor. Among the Hashira of the Taisho era, only Tengen and Shinobu never awakened theirs at all. For Tengen, the reason is simple. When he was still active, Tanjiro hadn't yet awakened his mark, so there was no precursor for him to trigger it. On top of that, Tengen retired right after the Entertainment District battle, which meant he didn't participate in Hashira training where others pushed themselves into unlocking it. Shinobu's case is a little different. She wasn't part of Hashira training either, so she never had the chance to push her body to the breaking point. And even if she did, Domo's cryokinesis would have prevented her from raising her body temperature high enough to trigger the mark. Then there's Guillaume, who continuously proves that he's just built different. He's the only known Demon Slayer character who could awaken his mark at will. Outside of Yoriichi and Tanjiro's father, who were born with theirs, every other Slayer had to rely on sheer physical strain to unlock it. When Genya consumed a piece of Kokoshibo's fleshy blade, a mark appeared on his forehead that looked identical to Kokoshibo's own. But whether it was his true mark or just an imitation is up to your interpretation. As it turns out, breathing styles don't actually create elemental attacks. The flames, water, and lightning you see are just visual effects. It's just illusions meant to represent the breathing style's power. Also, there's a reason why nobody ever calls flame breathing fire breathing in Demon Slayer. It's because the Japanese pronunciation would make it identical to sun breathing, but it's not. Sun breathing mimics the motion of the sun, while flame breathing mimics the flames. There's no correlation between them. The passing of sun breathing as Hinokami Kagura has deep roots in Japanese mythology. In Shinto folklore, there's a story about the sun goddess Amaterasu. When she hid in a cave, the world was thrown into darkness. To lure her out, Ame no Uzume, the goddess of dawn and revelry, danced outside the cave until Amaterasu returned. From that myth, the Kagura ritual was born. It's a sacred dance honoring the gods and ancestral spirits. Of course, in Demon Slayer, sun breathing was disguised as a Hinokami Kagura and passed down as a ritual dance that stayed the same long after everyone had forgotten about sun breathing. Still, when Tanjiro witnessed Yoriichi perform all 12 sun-breathing forms through Sumiyoshi's memories, he realized his own Hinokami Kagura forms were filled with wasted movements. Once he corrected them in his fight with Muzan, he stopped calling it Hinokami Kagura and finally referred to it properly as sun-breathing. Moon breathing, on the other hand, is the breathing style with the most forms of any breathing style. Kokoshibo also holds the record for the most blood demon art techniques. There are 9 Hashira, and the kanji for Hashira is written with 9 strokes. Out of the 9 Hashira, only 4 fought with regular Nichiren swords. These include Rengoku, Giyu, Sanemi, and Muichiro. Everyone else had their blade or other weapon customized. Mitsuri has the biggest appetite of all the Hashira, while Obanai eats the least out of everyone. And when it comes to arm wrestling between Hashira, Gyome ranks first, followed by Tengen. Rengoku, Sanemi, Giyu, and Mitsuri are all tied in the strong category, while Obanai and Shinobu are the weakest. For reference, Tanjiro is said to be between Muichiro and Obanai. By the way, while the entire Demon Slayer Corps is a very efficient and proper organization, there are still some bad apples. Like, say, Masao Maeda. He's a pervert whom everyone calls Scum Glasses, because he secretly designs female Demon Slayer uniforms to be lewd and revealing. He, of course, denies this. But let me tell you that this one time, Sanemi got so angry with him that Scum Glasses actually wet himself. He never appears in the main story, he only shows up in manga extras. Mitsuri's unusual hair color came from eating 170 pieces of sakura mochi a day for 8 months straight. Also, she can eat 100 sticks of dango in one sitting. The reason Urokodaki Sakonji wears a mask even though he's not a swordsmith is because demons used to make fun of his gentle face. And for the 108th fact, Giyu and Kyojuro are the only 2 characters who have their own spin-off stories. Now, since you made it this far, here's a bonus fact. After Muzan's defeat, Giyu's Haori was nearly ruined, but Nezuko sewed it back together, and Giyu was so grateful that he sent her all sorts of gifts, including kimonos, clothes, and hair ornaments. Please somebody give my boy a hug.